Hey everyone, welcome to the show. What if I told you everything you thought you knew about one of history's most infamous figures was wrong?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm intrigued already.
We're diving deep today into the life of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Of course, the man linked to JFK's assassination. A story that just won't fade away.
Exactly. It's a deep dive into historical nonfiction, true crime, the whole nine yards. If you love getting to the bottom of things as much as we do, hit that like button and subscribe.
Always a good idea. So, where are we starting?
Our guide today is The Final Trigger by Randall Windle. There's a link in the description if you want to follow along.
Sounds like my kind of book. What grabbed you about it?
Honestly, it was how Windle goes so much deeper than the usual story. It's like he gets inside Oswald's head.
Trying to understand the psychology behind such a complex figure. I like it.
Exactly. And Windle starts by looking at Oswald's early life, which, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
A neglected mother, an absent father.
And according to Oswald's wife Marina, a father who didn't even believe in him, you can't help but wonder how that kind of upbringing shapes a person.
Definitely makes you think. And that's where his interest in Marxism comes into play, right?
Yeah, but even that's not a simple story. I mean, he joins the Marines, has access to all sorts of sensitive information, and then what does he do?
Defects to the Soviet Union in 1959. Talk about a plot twist. What do you think was going on there?
Well, Windle suggests he might have been looking for a sense of belonging, like he was trying to prove himself.
To find a cause to believe in, to be part of something bigger than himself. Makes sense. Especially considering he later became disillusioned with the Soviet system, too. It wasn't just about rebelling against America.
It was deeper than that. It was a search for something to believe in, which makes his return to the U.S. with Marina in '62 all the more interesting.
They settled in Dallas, but things weren't easy for them.
Not at all. Financial struggles, feeling out of place, Oswald jumping from job to job. It's during this time that he meets a very interesting character, George de Mohrenschildt.
De Mohrenschildt. Now, there's a name that sends chills down my spine.
Tell me about it. He was this self-proclaimed baron with connections to the oil industry and maybe even to intelligence agencies.
Okay, now we're getting to some serious cloak and dagger territory. What was his relationship with Oswald like?
Windle says de Mohrenschildt helped Oswald out financially, even helped him find jobs. But here's the thing. Later on, de Mohrenschildt changes his story about their friendship.
Almost like he's trying to downplay it.
Exactly. And then, in 1977, he dies. Officially ruled a suicide, but of course there are all sorts of theories.
Makes you wonder what he knew, right?
It's like he's this shadowy figure lurking in the background of Oswald's life.
And then we have the attempted assassination of General Edwin Walker in April of '63. This is where things really start to heat up.
Walker was this controversial figure, very right-wing in his views. Windle presents some pretty strong evidence that Oswald was the shooter.
Including Oswald confessing to his wife, Marina. But the question is, why Walker? What was the motive?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like Oswald was becoming more and more radicalized, but his targets seemed all over the place.
First, he defects to the Soviet Union, a communist power. Then he tries to assassinate a staunch anti-communist in the U.S. What was the thread connecting these actions?
That's what's so fascinating and confusing about this case.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's Oswald's involvement with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
A pro-Castro organization, so now he's supporting the communist regime he supposedly rejected.
It's like a complete 180, right? Windle says Oswald was deeply involved with the group, even started a chapter in New Orleans. He was handing out pro-Castro leaflets, debating in public, even appeared on TV defending Castro.
Talk about embracing the spotlight. It makes you wonder about his true motivations. Was he really a committed Marxist or just drawn to the drama of it all?
It's a question that's hard to answer definitively. And then there's the whole Alec Heidel thing.
Alec Heidel, what's that all about?
That was the alias Oswald used to open a post office box and order weapons, including, you guessed it, the rifle later connected to the Kennedy assassination. Some people think he chose that alias because it sounded similar to Fidel.
Whoa, that's creepy. So we've got this guy, Oswald, who's clearly drawn to extremes, full of contradictions, and now using a fake name that possibly hints at his allegiance to Fidel Castro. It's like something out of a spy thriller.
It definitely is. And we haven't even gotten to the events of November 22nd, 1963, the day that changed everything.
Right, the assassination of JFK. But before we dive into that, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to examine. Oswald's trip to Mexico City just weeks before the assassination.
Ah, yes, Mexico City. That's where things get even more tangled. Yeah, so Oswald goes to Mexico City, and he visits both the Cuban and Soviet embassies.
He's still hung up on these communist histories, so what was he doing there?
He was supposedly trying to get visas.
To go to Cuba and the Soviet Union.
Yep. But here's where things get a little fuzzy. The details are really murky, and that's where all those conspiracy theories start to swirl.
What do you mean murky?
Well, like there are witnesses who put him in different places with different people. Some even say there's a chance someone was impersonating him.
Impersonating him. That sounds like something out of a spy novel.
Right. It's crazy stuff. And this Mexico City trip is a big deal because it could help us understand what happened next. Was he meeting with Cuban or Soviet officials? Was someone using him or was he acting on his own?
I see what you mean. Windle lays out all the different theories, but he doesn't give you a straight answer. It's like he wants you to figure it out yourself.
Exactly. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the assassination itself, November 22nd, 1963, a day that's seared into the memory of every American.
A day that still sparks debate and speculation to this day.
For sure. And Windle did a great job of reconstructing the scene, Kennedy's motorcade in Dealey Plaza. The shots, the chaos. He presents the facts, but he also points out all the unanswered questions that have fueled conspiracy theories for decades.
Like the question of where Oswald was at the Texas School Book Depository, right?
Exactly. Windle talks about how Oswald was working on the 6th floor, which gave him a clear view of the motorcade.
And that's where they found the rifle, too, the one that belonged to Oswald?
Yep, hidden right there on the 6th floor. But Windle doesn't just leave it at that. He digs into all the different witness accounts.
Which paint a very different picture.
Some of them do. Some witnesses say they saw Oswald on other floors just minutes before and after the shooting.
So you're saying there's doubt about whether he could have even taken those shots?
Exactly. Some even place him in the lunchroom on the 2nd floor, which doesn't make sense if he'd just fired 3 shots from the 6th floor and stashed a rifle.
It does make you wonder if the official timeline is accurate. And of course we have to talk about the single bullet theory.
Ah, yes. The Warren Commission's claim that one bullet hit both Kennedy and Governor Connally.
A theory that's been debated endlessly.
To say the least, Windle looks at the evidence for and against it, the ballistics, the autopsy reports, the bullet's trajectory. He even gets into the specifics of the ballistic evidence that researchers have challenged over the years.
What kind of challenges are we talking about?
Well, critics of the single bullet theory point out inconsistencies in the bullet's path and where the wounds were. Some argue that the bullet would have had to change direction in midair to cause the wounds described in the official reports.
That does seem pretty far-fetched. Doesn't Windle also bring up other theories like shots fired from the grassy knoll?
He does. He talks about the witnesses who said they heard shots coming from that area and the possibility of multiple shooters.
It's like every answer just leads to more questions. No wonder there are so many conspiracy theories.
That's the nature of the beast with this case, and Windle embraces that complexity. He wants you to think critically and question everything.
Okay, so we have the assassination, the conflicting witness accounts, and all the doubts about the official story. What happens next?
Things get even wilder 45 minutes after Kennedy's killed, Officer J.D. Tippit is shot.
It's like everything just descends into chaos. Windle describes Oswald just wandering around Dallas like he's in a daze. He even stops to buy a soda before running into Tippit.
It's a bizarre series of events, and Windle really digs into the witness testimonies. Some put Oswald at the scene, others say he was nowhere near it. He also examines the timing of Tippit's murder and how it fits into the timeline of Oswald's supposed movements.
So much doesn't add up. And then there's his arrest at the Texas Theater.
Right. Windle describes how Oswald resisted arrest, even pulled out a gun and tried to shoot the officers.
Adding another layer of mystery to his motives.
Was he just trying to get away, or did he think he was part of something bigger and was scared for his life?
It's hard to know what was going on in his head. And then we have the interrogation scene with Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas Police Department.
Oswald says he didn't do it. He had nothing to do with the Kennedy and Tippit shootings, but Windle points out that his answers are slippery and don't always match up.
So he's playing games with him.
Maybe it's like he's hiding something or sending a message, or maybe he just liked the attention. It's hard to say. And of course, there's that bombshell moment when Jack Ruby shoots Oswald dead on live television.
I still remember where I was when I heard about that. It was just so shocking.
It was a moment that stunned the entire nation. The Warren Commission said that Ruby was acting alone, that he just wanted to avenge Kennedy's death, but Windle raises some good points about whether that's the whole story.
Like how easy it was for Ruby to get close to Oswald.
Exactly. With all the media attention and threats against Oswald's life, you'd think security would have been tighter. So many people believe Ruby was part of a cover-up, that he was silencing Oswald before he could spill any secrets.
The whole case is just full of what-ifs.
It really is. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces and pieces that just don't fit together. And the picture keeps changing as you try to make sense of it all. And Windle doesn't shy away from that complexity.
So where do we go from here? With all these theories and unanswered questions, what are we left with?
That's where Windle really makes you think for yourself. He looks at some of the most popular conspiracy theories, the CIA, the Mafia, even Lyndon B. Johnson. But he doesn't say any of them are definitely true.
He just lays out all the evidence, the arguments for and against each theory, and lets you come to your own conclusion.
Exactly. He wants you to be an active part of the search for truth, not just someone who's told what to believe. Let's start with the CIA theory. Some people think the CIA wanted Kennedy gone after the Bay of Pigs invasion in '61.
That was a major failure for the Kennedy administration and for the CIA. They tried to overthrow Castro, but it backfired big time.
Right. And there's the theory that Kennedy made things worse when he decided to scale back the invasion and refused to give direct military support. Some in the CIA were furious. They saw Castro as a serious threat.
It's like Kennedy was trying to control the CIA to limit what they were doing. Some people think that made him a target for those who felt he was getting in their way.
That's one way to look at it. So what about the mafia? How do they fit into all of this?
Organized crime had a lot to lose when Kennedy was in office, right? His brother Robert Kennedy was Attorney General, and he was cracking down on the mafia hard. He targeted their gambling operations and their control over labor unions.
Right. The Kennedys were a direct threat to the mafia's power and money.
So the theory goes that the mafia decided to get rid of that threat permanently.
It's a chilling thought, and Windle even mentions the possibility of the mafia and the CIA working together to get rid of Kennedy.
They had teamed up before to try and assassinate Castro, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they might have joined forces again.
Definitely adds another layer of intrigue to this whole story. And then there's the LBJ theory, the idea that Lyndon B. Johnson Kennedy's own vice president was somehow involved.
Why would he want Kennedy dead?
Windle explores a few different angles. Some say Johnson was worried about being dropped from the 1964 election ticket because of scandals and investigations. Others say he was just incredibly ambitious and saw a chance to grab the presidency.
And let's not forget that Johnson did benefit from Kennedy's death. He became president and used the tragedy to push his own agenda, like escalating the Vietnam War.
A pretty unsettling thought. Windle also delves into Jim Garrison's investigation in New Orleans, a whole other rabbit hole to go down.
Garrison was the district attorney there, and he believed that Kennedy's assassination was planned in New Orleans. He focused on guys like Clay Shaw, a businessman with suspected CIA ties, and David Ferry, a pilot linked to anti-Castro groups.
Garrison thought Oswald was just a small part of a much bigger conspiracy that was operating out of New Orleans. He even suggested that Oswald might have been a patsy, someone who was set up to take the fall.
That's wild. So we have all these competing narratives, and it's hard to know what to believe. It's like trying to put together a giant puzzle, but some pieces are missing, others don't fit, and the picture keeps changing.
That's a great analogy. It's the perfect way to describe this case. And I think that's what makes Windle's book so brilliant. He doesn't act like he has all the answers. He just wants to get you thinking and keep the conversation going.
It's like we're going back and forth. Was Oswald just a lone nut, or was he a pawn in some bigger scheme?
That's what keeps people coming back to this case, right? It just refuses to fit into a neat little box. And that's why The Final Trigger is such a good read. Windle doesn't try to shove a conclusion down your throat. He just lays everything out and lets you decide.
He gives you the evidence, all the different sides, the things that just don't add up. And you're left to figure it out for yourself.
It's refreshing, isn't it? He treats you like you're smart enough to think for yourself.
Exactly. It's not just about finding out what happened to Kennedy. It's about understanding how we make sense of history in general.
How we create stories, how our own beliefs can color the way we see things.
That's a really important point. And sometimes those unanswered questions are the ones that keep us thinking.
Absolutely. And that's why books like this are so important. They keep the conversation going. They make us question what we think we know.
They remind us that truth isn't always black and white. There are a lot of gray areas.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's the beauty of studying history. It's a journey, always changing, always making us think.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into The Final Trigger, what stood out to you? What really grabbed your attention?
You know, it's funny. For me, it's Oswald himself. The guy's a walking contradiction. He defects to the Soviet Union, then gets disillusioned with communism. He wants to be in the spotlight, but he's also a total enigma. It makes you wonder, was he manipulating everyone? Was he just a pawn in someone else's game? Or was he just a really messed up guy who got in way over his head?
That's what keeps me coming back to this story, too. The fact that we may never know the whole truth.
Right. It's a reminder that history isn't just dates and facts. It's about people, and people are complicated.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into The Final Trigger and the mystery of the Kennedy assassination.
We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to let us know what you thought in the comments. What's stuck with you? What questions are you still pondering? And we love hearing from you guys.
And if you like this deep dive, please share it. Let's get more people talking about these fascinating and sometimes unsettling parts of history. Until next time, keep those minds curious.